Well, it's been a while since I've shared any new therapeutic thoughts, and I apologize. I know during this difficult time for everyone that mental health is a challenge, and I've neglected to try to share with friends and family perhaps things that might be helpful. And I had an experience recently that made me kind of contemplate this perhaps on a more personal level, and I want to share a few things with you. So, gratitude is an interesting concept, especially in the field of behavioral sciences and mental health. There's been a lot of research on gratitude over the years, and I'll talk a little bit about that research shortly. You know, we have a lot of cliches such as no one ever hurt their eyesight by looking on the bright side of things, or when asked if I see a glass as half empty or half full, I'm just grateful to have a glass, and so forth. And these sorts of cliches are sometimes helpful to remind us to be grateful. But I had an experience recently. I'm doing telehealth with patients with various mental health issues during this time, certainly increased anxiety and depression and loneliness and so forth. And I had a patient with COVID-19 who said in a very somber kind of a way, "I'm grateful for oxygen." And as he said that, it just struck me, such a chord within me. And I thought, wow, such a simple, basic thing that, frankly, I think many of us take for granted. And yet here, because of this individual's medical condition, it helped them appreciate something that we often neglect to be grateful for. But it made me contemplate and think more in my life about what I'm grateful for and perhaps what I'm failing to acknowledge or appreciate in my life. And I acknowledge as well as in saying this that as Dr. Robert Emmons, who's a foremost expert on gratitude research from the University of California, Davis, he's said on a couple different occasions, it's not just, gratitude is not just about being appreciative. There are many nuances or complexities to that. And after doing, committing his entire career to research in this area, he certainly is an expert. And that's an interesting statement that he made. So this weekend, I took a little bit of time and I reviewed quickly over 232 studies from the past 10 years on gratitude, just to kind of bring myself up to speed, and wanted to share a few things with you. First of all, the research on gratitude is quite compelling in terms of its beneficial effects in our lives. In the wake of everything that's going on right now, certainly the research that supports the idea of helping us cope with stress and increase stress resiliency is an important benefit to gratitude. In psychology and in psychiatry and mental health more broadly, we talk about two different ways of approaching stress. One is a problem-solving focused approach versus an emotionally focused approach. With problem solving, we either increase our resources, decrease our demands. In the wake of the current situation, that's not always feasible. And so bolstering ways or finding ways that we can increase our emotionally focused strategies in helping us cope with stress is advantageous. And gratitude is one of those ways. And we somehow think that maybe what's happening that is a belief, I guess, that gratitude gives people a different perspective from which they can interpret life events in a way that might not come naturally to us. Another benefit of being grateful or having a gratitude practice in our life is increased levels of energy, being more optimistic, being more attentive and alert. Having a lot more positive emotions such as happiness and joy and life satisfaction. We also know that it reduces things such as loneliness or depression or anxiety. There's been a couple of studies that even suggest that gratitude can help abate suicidal thoughts and feelings. We know that there are some physical health benefits to gratitude practices as well, such as enhancing our immune system or lowering our blood pressure. It also has been shown to improve, in a couple of different studies, improve the quality of our sleep. With people who practice being grateful prior to sleep, report in the next morning having a lot more restorative sleep and feeling more refreshed. We also know that practices of gratitude are also correlated with increased productivity. It also helps enhance our social relationships and connections. We begin to kind of realize or recognize the contributions of others to our own lives, and we're less likely to take people for granted. I'm often reminded of this saying that if we took out of our lives what other people have contributed to it, what would be left? And as we wrestle with that, we might find that much of our lives are the product of what other people have contributed. There's also research that supports gratitude in romantic relationships, increasing levels of commitment and relationship satisfaction, and contentment in our relationships. So I want to suggest a couple of different ways that we can cultivate gratitude. First, I think it's important for us to have a practice that draws attention to more grateful ways of thinking. In a lot of the studies that have been done, people are invited to journal things about which they're grateful, meditate, perhaps contemplate things about which they are grateful. I think putting reminder notes, obviously remembering is an antecedent to actually being able to be grateful, putting reminder notes around the house of just to remember to be appreciative and grateful, or to write a thank you letter perhaps to somebody who has influenced your life in a significant way. Another way to cultivate gratitude is to focus on quality rather than quantity. And this has been borne out in the research as well, that it's better to focus on one thing and reflect more deeply about it with more detail and perhaps a lot more specificity than it is to just focus broadly on things that might not be as meaningful. In other words, don't overdose on gratitude. More is not necessarily better. Another suggestion is being grateful for a characteristic or quality that you attribute to a person is more beneficial than being grateful about material things. And so those particular reflections of gratitude tend to have a lot more benefit to us. Another suggestion is don't apply gratitude, and I'm drawing on this from the work of Dr. Robert Emmons, Dr. Michael McCullough, and also Dr. Amie Gordon. These are three of the prominent researchers over the past few decades on gratitude research. And Dr. Gordon at UC Berkeley has taken this approach of kind of asking ourselves, well, are there any downsides or things that we should be cautioned about when expressing gratitude? And one of the things that she advocates for in her research and has found in her research is that we shouldn't apply gratitude to somebody irrationally in a way that's undeserved. So, for example, someone who's mistreating us or someone who is taking our kindness for granted in a way that is hurtful. Another suggestion is that we don't use gratitude to avoid addressing serious problems. In other words, it can't be a distractor or a substitute for addressing problems that actually need to be resolved. Cultivating gratitude can also be fostered through giving back, volunteering some of our time and our energy in a way that causes us to think about others other than being self-focused. And the recommendation here is obviously that we give back and volunteer to a cause that we feel passionate about. Also, there's a suggestion that we don't hyper-focus on being grateful to the extent that we discount or fail to acknowledge our own strengths. And I think this is something important as we are expressing and appreciative of various things in our gratitude practices. And then we don't confuse gratitude with indebtedness. I think sometimes we feel like, if somebody does something nice for us, that somehow we're indebted to them to do something in return. And if you think back to times in your own life where you've done something for somebody, often it's with no expectation that they reciprocate. We're just trying to do something nice. And so when we are feeling grateful, we don't necessarily have to equate that with this notion that, oh no, now I owe them something. And so these are just some ways that we can cultivate gratitude. And I think in the wake of everything that's going on, taking a little bit of time every day to acknowledge and recognize something for which we can be grateful, I think can be advantageous in terms of our overall psychological well-being and our ability to cope with all of the stressors that are currently prevalent in our lives and so forth. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to put a few links here for a couple of books that I think are advantageous in terms of maybe cultivating a gratitude practice, and a couple of videos from some of the prominent researchers that I have been referring to. Stay safe, and I wish everybody well in the wake of all of this difficult time that we're enduring. I know we can get through this together, and I think that gratitude is one of those ways that can help us get through this pandemic in a way where we're appreciative of the small things, those 1,000 small moments in life that perhaps we otherwise take for granted.